We have a panel of folks that are going to speak to you about their journey with entrepreneurship through acquisition. And the stories are different and they're impactful. And I couldn't think of a better person to moderate, to facilitate this panel than Simon Peck. Simon is, for those that don't know Simon is a professor at Weatherhead in strategic management. And he's also responsible for the key programming there around entrepreneurship through acquisition. And so as you look ahead to maybe the conversations we're going to have together today in this room, Simon's going to play a key role in helping some of those dreams, some of those aspirations, some of those things you're looking for, some of those things you think are going to help expand the impact, right? Help more people achieve their promise, help businesses grow and make an impact in this community. Simon's going to be a key resource to help that happen. So Simon, do you want to join me up here? I'm going to do a little shuffling here with the panel to get it ready. Please give Simon a big round of applause.
Thank you very much. Welcome everyone. As we just said, I am a professor, so there is work to do during the session. There are things on this page. You are going to be looking to fill in key learnings and things that you're going to do yourself. Unlike one of my more typical classes, I'm going to assume that this audience isn't predominantly engaged in e-commerce, though, during the session. Could I invite my panelists to come up on stage? Do we have microphones as well, guys, coming back? We do. Very cool. So that's Larry Fulton, Cheryl Strom, Charu Ramanathan, Marlin Engel, and Scott Lowry. And I'll just give them a brief introduction. Larry is a Weatherhead graduate from 2002. After graduation, he was a banker at KeyBank Corp, but then self-funded his own search and has acquired multiple businesses since then. A keen advocate of the entrepreneurship scene in Cleveland. He's on the board at Jumpstart and Magnet, and is wearing a tie today because he may have to duck out and meet Janet Yellen, whoever she is. Thank you for doing that today. Cheryl Strom, also a Weatherhead graduate from 99? You got it. Yeah, I got it. She's a principal at the Riverside Company, where she does the lead of origination. She's looking for investments and has a lot of deep insight into the ETA scene around here. So we're looking forward to hearing that. Charu Ramanathan is a serial startup entrepreneur. Currently the CEO of Vital Exchange, and very actively engaged in the volunteer community, recently engaged in the delivery of respirators down to Ecuador. Interesting work, Charu, thank you. Marlin Engel, a computer science graduate from Kent State, has started and acquired multiple tech companies. Currently the CEO of Wilco Tech Software, which is a SaaS company in the cybersecurity. I didn't know Marlin before. If you Google him, first thing that comes up is that he is a recipient of the Crane's 40 Under 40 award. Do you still qualify for that?
I'm still under 40.
There we go. Wearing well. And then finally, Scott Lowry. Scott is a Weatherhead graduate from 2001. Had an interesting career path, but achieved his dream of acquisition through entrepreneurship in 2006, and has since then mentored many other folks on that path. I ought to say Scott has been the driving force of this event today. We're very grateful for him for doing that. And if you know Scott at all, he's such an advocate of ETA, he could comfortably talk about ETA for 60 minutes non-stop without pausing. So part of my job up here today is just to shut him up a little bit and let others speak. You know. So let's do this. When we bring people into classes, you know, a lot of the most revealing stuff is in hearing the stories. And so I'm going to ask you first, Larry. I mean, you know, how did you go from being a banker to the owner of, multiple businesses. Could you tell us a bit about that story?
Sure. Well, I was born here in Cleveland. I grew up down in South Carolina, a little small city called Orangeburg, South Carolina. Probably no one here has heard of it, but I went to high school there, and during high school, I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I just didn't know exactly what type of business I wanted to get into, quite frankly. So I majored in business administration from Florida A&M University. And then my first job after graduating was with KeyBank. And I landed in the retail management training program and absolutely hated retail banking. So I knew I didn't want to do that, but I knew I wanted to be in banking so I can learn about businesses and financing, right? So I convinced senior management to let me go through the commercial banking management training program, and that's when I landed a role in structured finance. And structured finance is highly leveraged transactions, middle market size businesses up to $500 million in financing. So actions, management buyouts, acquisitions, recapitalizations, things like that. But I never could see myself buying that size of an organization. Quite frankly, I just didn't have the capital. My parents didn't have a lot of money. They were in education, unfortunately, right? For me, anyway. So after KeyBank, I worked for the SBA, the Small Business Administration. And so the point that I'm trying to make here is, I took the longer route in terms of getting not just education, but also the experience from a theoretical or finance standpoint. And then I'll talk just really briefly on operational kind of experience that I was able to get as well. So from the SBA, I was working with guys that wanted to start their own businesses, wanted to do smaller acquisitions, car washes, distribution, small machine shop manufacturing companies, startups. And so I did a lot of those types of financing structures. So they're very simple. Work with a lot of smaller private equity and debt financing companies. And so I did that for several years. And then I got my MBA here at Case and focused on entrepreneurship and management policy. So from there, my major question to myself was, okay, I know that finance, right? But how do I actually run a business? And so the first stop that I wound up making after my MBA program was to be a controller over a telecom manufacturing company. So I did that for several years, and then I was a finance manager / CFO for a division with Alcoa. And when the general manager retired, because we had turned that business segment over and made a lot of money for Alcoa, I became the general manager. And so that gave me the operating experience that I needed to run a business. It took me a little bit of time, 17 years in corporate America, but because I married right, I have a wonderful partner, we were able to save a lot of money by living with my parents from when we first graduated from college. We saved for a number of years, and so I had not just the equity to make my first acquisition, but also the equity to weather the storms that were to come after that initial deal. And that's really how I kind of started into business.
Yeah, just in case Dr. Yellen does give you a call. Could I just get you to say a little bit more about how you made that transition? And as you say, it was a slow burn here until you actually achieved.
Sure.
ETA dream.
So 2003, I bought my first business. I won't go into specific number details, but it was a small acquisition. I couldn't afford it myself, quite frankly. I was still making money at Alcoa, so I brought a person in to run that first acquisition. We had a handful of employees, a handful of customers. I bought that DP Products. It was a Middlefield pallet manufacturing business. So I would travel from Cleveland to Middlefield and back during my lunch hours and weekends. I did that in 2003. 2005, I purchased International Container Systems. That was a larger acquisition, and so I was able to consolidate operations. We moved from 5,000 square feet to 17,000 square feet in Cleveland, Ohio. And I did things like kind of optimizing the operations, eliminating duplicative expenses, things like that, to really, kind of put some fire on that business. So we really started growing organically. 2008, I was fortunate enough to do a joint venture with Worthington Industries, which is a Fortune 1000 company. So I sold them 49% of the business at that point, and that got me into steel rack fabrication and some other businesses. I bought them out in 2012, restructured the business around 2016 to really focus primarily on wood crating. So I exited the wood pallet business, and that was a really challenging decision for me to give up millions of dollars and sell off some of that business, because our size went from, you know, a much higher level to a much smaller level, but our margins went up, and so we actually made more money. And so my advisors really helped me through that time period. 2018, I bought a couple of businesses, actually. I bought a bolt-on to Lefco Worthington at the time that expanded our equipment, I guess, capability and our customer our customers. 2018, I also bought a fiberglass manufacturing business called Hanlon Composites. Hanlon is also a fairly small business. We have about 26 employees, and we make like the white heated benches that you might see on the sidelines of the NFL, and some other kind of fiberglass products as well. And I also just kind of recapitalized along the way and did some other deals as well. So that's my story.
Very cool.
Cheryl, what's your perspective on like the sort of the ETA scene, the environment? What are you picking up from the market?
Sure. So the ETA scene, from my perspective on this, is based on 16 years at Riverside. And my firm, the Riverside Company, we're a private equity investor in small and medium-sized businesses. There's a whole ecosystem of private equity firms across the country and around the world. Our firm is somewhat different. We do raise a fairly large amount of capital. We have about $13 billion in assets under management right now. But we use it to invest in very often very small businesses. We have built new platform companies, in one instance from a fairly tiny company in Canton, Ohio, that became the basis of a new platform, had roughly between a 7 to 10 million enterprise value at the time we made our investment. Under 10 million in revenue, and pretty much a lifestyle business, but one where the owner had believed, hey, there's an opportunity to buy 17 other companies a lot like mine and create a super regional business. And in fact, in that individual instance, that person wasn't the right person to undertake the leadership of that, but another professional who had spent 20 years in a family-owned business, never getting a piece of equity himself, was introduced to our firm and essentially became the entrepreneur through acquisition with our checkbook. And so now we have an executive who his whole life wanted to be the owner, who's a very meaningful shareholder in a group of companies that is now composed of 18 different acquisitions that we've blended together and integrated to a pretty important business in its industry. That's just one example, but to give you a picture of what is the size of the potential of this entrepreneur through acquisition and market, it's really the availability of small and middle market sized businesses to acquire, and then matching the person's skill set with a leadership role there. I mean, as Larry talked about, you've seen hundreds, thousands. Really, I know the number through Professor Scott Lowry. It's as many as 6 million companies are available in this small to middle market size world. For Riverside, our playground are those companies that could range from about 5 to 10 million in enterprise value up to 400 million in enterprise value. And last year, we looked at 4,000 possible investment opportunities in order to arrive at closing 68 investments out of our equity funds. But I can say that, where are these companies coming from? Well, sometimes they're corporations divesting a non-core division. Sometimes they're founder-owned businesses where there isn't a succession plan within the business, and that founder needs to find someone else to become that business owner. And sometimes there are other private equity firms of all shapes and sizes. Everyone's trying to do private equity these days. Riverside has been doing this for 34 years, but as more and more individuals and experts and talented entrepreneur-minded people form groups, raise some capital, use it to buy companies and help make them better and stronger. There is a proliferation of private equity firms of all shapes and sizes. And generally speaking, we must sell our companies after about 5 to 7 years because we've promised our investors that they will experience returns in that type of a pattern. It's not that we're bad people and flipping the company quickly and trying to make that short-term gain. Well, we're very often doing very, very hard work over a 5 to 7 year period and helping pension funds, retirement funds, even universities and endowments experience a return that's better than they could experience in the liquid market with this, fairly non-liquid, but every 5 to 7 to 10 years you will receive your returns. And if we work really hard and achieve what we set out to achieve, top quartile returns. But the market is huge. There is a plentiful availability of both companies where every year owners must find a solution to their problem, which is I must sell this business, as well as talented people, many in this room, to be buyers of those companies, and capital providers that will partner with you if you express interest. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to some of the stuff you said there. Let me just, to Charu and Maling, you guys basically started off as sort of a startup, folks, really, but you obviously see something about, the ETA as a way of scaling and moving your organisations forwards. Could I get you both to sort of say a little bit about that?
Well, I'm new to this because I've always been a tech founder, really starting things from scratch. So I thought ETA was estimated time of arrival till 2 weeks ago till I met Scott. So what intrigues me about this avenue is that startups typically have founders that have great ideas, but after they've built the product or prototype and really showed that initial product market fit, there's a moment when either the founder makes the transition into scaling the business and knowing how to grow it, especially in complex ecosystems, mine being healthcare, and I have a fintech company as well. Or sometimes they don't, and one of the failure modes of a startup is when that founder succession doesn't happen, and you can't find the right person for the job. So I'm very eager to understand this avenue for ETA, and it's not just acquisition, it's not just the capital play, but also bringing your experienced talent into the startup ecosystem and really transforming it from that early stage, bootstrapped, scrappy startup to something that's set up for scale and bringing in a different level of talent to it, and that's kind of why I'm here.
No, that's fantastic. I mean, and Malin, I mean, we mentioned these 80, 90 businesses that Promise Partners or the heroes of Promise Partners have acquired. They run the gamut of all industries, everything from hockey rinks to digital marketing agencies. Okay, but we tend not to think about it too much in the technology space. And particularly, I know you're in the software as a service space. Could I get you to say a bit about that, because you bring insights there?
Yeah, it really does cut across industries. And as we're talking about talented individuals acquiring to grow, there are a lot of cases of individuals where you have a startup and you're growing, and can you acquire the customer base of an existing business and maybe apply the startup technology that you're building, or acquire an existing business and bring more, whether it's vision or operational talent, into that world. Certainly the same is true in tech. There's a lot of danger in tech debt and other things where you run into where there are intangible assets, but every business has those complications. So there's a lot of active technology companies out there that haven't found product market fit. And if you have a market where you can apply that technology, you can oftentimes buy a software business or buy the technology and apply it in your market, and really leverage an existing investment, significant investment often, where they haven't been able to find that fit.
That's interesting. I mean, why do sellers why are they interested in working with you? I mean, what do you?
Yeah, oftentimes, as we're talking about founders and they make that transition, same is true for operators. They might grow to a certain size, and they might get to a certain size where they don't know how to go to the next level. They might be hitting a scaling challenge. You might have better operations or better sales or better marketing. And if they've hit a ceiling, and I've got a lot of experience in distressed acquisitions, I'll call them that, and fixing other people's problems. But I will say, if you like solving problems, there's plenty of challenges out there. It's a very active marketplace. But if they have hit that ceiling and you see an opportunity through it, or you see a better market for that technology, there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of upside.
All right, Professor Lowry. You know, one of the most powerful sessions that I've been in, and I know you've been in it, is when the late Mal Mixon came to class. And, Mal explained how, he went all in with about $10,000 and acquired, a $5 million company, Invacare, and obviously we know what happened to that. And that's a very powerful moment for me, where the class actually realized, oh, I don't need $5 million to buy a $5 million company. So tell a little bit about, how you got to get involved with business ownership through this method.
Yeah, so I was in that exact situation. I heard that, and I came to Weatherhead to, like Larry, transitioning from banking to something different. I was in the construction management industry, and I learned a lot. It made me a great operator, but I knew I didn't want to be in that industry forever. I always had a dream of business ownership, but I didn't have $1 million to buy a company. I didn't have a family business to inherit, and startups just are too scary for my risk profile. And so when I heard that story, literally with Mal as a guest, it blew my mind that I could take my experience and find somebody who knows how to do acquisitions and had capital, and then put that together and make that transition. And so I got involved with the Promise Partners group. I met a lot of people who had actually made that transition. I put my strategy together, and over the course of 4 or 5 years, prepared myself to launch a full-time search with a partner who provided lots of experience and capital, and that's ultimately what got me started. We initially bought a company that was much larger than what I could have bought all by myself. I didn't have the experience to buy. It was about a $4 million company with about 25 employees. I wouldn't have been able to do that by myself. So by partnering, I was able to get into a larger sort of platform and vehicle that we could grow. And because I had the benefit of experience, I felt confident going into that environment and taking my previous operating experience and being able to take that company forward.
I want to come back to something you said, Cheryl, and it's something that you touched on, Marlon. I mean, I think one of the things around Promise is that it allows you to play bigger in one sense than you are. And maybe I'll get you to say a little bit more about this idea of creating these platforms at Riverside. And then Marlon, the same thing to you about, what you're doing as well. I mean.
Sure, no, it's a great question. So I've been a member of Promise Partners since my graduation from Weatherhead. I don't want to count how many years ago back, and certainly seen and been close to, and am now in a position where I can provide some mentorship to those individuals who are looking for a source of capital. As Scott Lowry has, and the 90 other businesses that Promise has supported through their connections and advice and mentoring, those businesses have all been acquired without the involvement of a private equity firm, and that absolutely can happen. There's autonomy and a private set of individuals, or even one individual who's in charge and who can make all the decisions, and that is absolutely a fulfilling and very exciting prospect. As there are many options for many roads that can be gone down in life, another road or pathway to this business ownership, leadership, co-ownership model would be an individual who wants to partner with a private equity firm and perhaps buy a bigger company, maybe outside of the under 5 to 10 million enterprise value range, maybe a 20 or 30 million enterprise value business. We have a portfolio company today that we bought together with an individual. This person had been a relationship manager at a bank. There are many people at banks who look at all the different borrowers they have and say, a couple more years of this, and then I'm going to be the one, who is the owner and seeking a lender for my business. And this individual wanted to buy a company that had an enterprise value of about $20 million, and he brought to the table $25,000. But what he brought to the table was the relationship with the owner, who was the daughter of the founder, who was in her 70s. This was an interesting company that he identified that had the opportunity to grow meaningfully, hadn't raised prices in 10 or 20 years, had a unique and niche-oriented product. And for him, the best way to go about that acquisition was to partner with a private equity firm. So sure, in that case, the Riverside company became the majority owner. We are a collaborative investor. We have absolutely no desire to have our people running a business. We have a lot of resources to help the management teams be successful achieving what will be a challenging goal. We have, in order for a private equity fund to make it to the next fund, to continue to sustain itself, and Riverside has been doing this for 34 years, your portfolio has to perform at the top quartile of its industry, because and the bar is really constantly being raised by those around you. Your competitor gets a little bit better, you have to get a little bit better. So the amount of resources that we've actually invested in under our roof to help our portfolio companies has grown very meaningfully, from operating partners to sales excellence professionals to a RISO. How could you survive without a RISO? This is the Riverside Information Security Office, helping many of these small businesses troubleshoot troublesome IT problems, which themselves could be big problems if a structure isn't put in place to prevent them. We once did invest in a company that had about 12 employees, where the server for the company, which had consumer data globally, was in the founder's basement. So we did have to help that company establish some processes and protocols, to be more successful. So the path along with a private equity firm can look a little bit different. It means someone else has technical control. As long as the management team and the private equity sponsor have the same goals, that's really a shared and common road to go down together. And the resources behind you can be larger than one might be able to assemble with their own personal network. And also, another reason to think about that path is, do you need money in a checkbook to make add-on acquisitions? A small group of individuals may be able to buy that first company, but if you want to acquire 10 add-on acquisitions because that opportunity exists in the end market to become a super regional player or a national player, a private equity firm will have committed money that doesn't have to be raised every time that add-on acquisition presents itself, but it's ready to go as long as it meets the investment thesis.
Yeah, thanks. Very cool. Madeline, how do you make your acquisitions sort of play bigger in that sense?
Yeah, I really like the roll-up strategy. We see that a lot in other technical businesses, where you might buy the first with a group of individuals, tune up the processes, get better at the market, understand the opportunity a little bit deeper, and then raise additional capital, maybe with the private equity group, to go out and close additional acquisitions. So definitely don't think of it as the first acquisition is the end of the journey. It's just that one milestone. Maybe there's more acquisitions. Maybe you want to raise from venture firms. There's no pre-qualification. You're not changing the shape of the business. You're at that state that you acquired it. So if you can get into the business, hopefully get good advisors, and then grow from there. You can certainly, in tech, the exact same thing applies. A lot of times towards customer base or towards building something that would take too long to build. If they've already got the tech, they've already got the team, and they're a culture fit, a lot of times, especially in tech, it's hard to, like most fields, it's hard to hire people. But if you can acquire and fold the team in and then grow faster, you can save yourself a lot of time. So it helps for market penetration.
Yeah, I'm going to come to Chari. I just want to acknowledge my colleague, Professor Scott Shane at the back. He's he's our go-to guy for startup and technology investing. And I remember Scott organised a panel in over on the left coast in Silicon Valley, and it was with some of our alums. And one of them got up and said, yeah, if we invest in 30 companies, we expect 25 of them to go bust. 3 to break even, 1 to make some money, and 1 to make a ton of money. And I always remember thinking, those sort of odds scare the bejesus out of me. I mean, I just don't think I can do that. But so Chari, maybe if I could just get you to speak a little bit more about, the differences between the right person to start might not always be the right person to develop up and scale. And what, in your experience, have you seen there?
Yeah, so, I mean, according to the Startup Failure Journal, there's such a thing on the internet. One of the things is that you don't plan the founder succession properly, and it's really hard because the founder has all the heart and the passion and has started it, built the loyalties, the early customers, as well as the first few employees that join the team. So really thinking about it may not be an organic thought process on the founder's mind, but also the board of directors may also have a lot of, it's probably 18 months to 2 years longer than it should be. So one of the things that would be really good, which I do think is more frequent in the Silicon Valley compared to Cleveland, is the talent pool is just much smaller here. And I don't know if it's smaller or less accessible here. I honestly did not know about the ETA program. Like now I'm thinking about the possibilities of, getting someone that's seasoned exec that can come on board and try something for a while, see the culture fit, because startups have a very different culture compared to, bigger corporations, steady jobs. I think Kevin said about the Robert Frost poem, you're taking the road that obviously has a lot of puddles that you're not going to be able to walk in your nice leather shoes. So you're going to take that path knowing there's no money, there's a lot of problems, and you're not exactly going to fit in. And you're like, well, this is so romantic and this is so awesome, right? So you're doing it for the right reasons, but your ROI is quite risky, both from your ability to make a living standpoint, but also the ability to make yourself successful in that organization when the odds are against you. So there is definitely a culture fit aspect. I think it's doable, and I think more people do it. Then you kind of start to develop how do you make that bridge between someone that needs to come on board, needs to have an assistant, needs to have processes in place that startups typically don't have. And I do think that's really where the innovation can take place and really have I'd like to see it in this ecosystem, for example.
Yeah, Larry, you're pretty central to the system right here. I mean, as Charu points out, this isn't Silicon Valley. But what is it? What is Cleveland? And what are you going to tell Janet Yellen today, by the way? I mean, when you say about
so I
this.
have 4 questions for Janet Yellen, and essentially she's here in Cleveland because there's significant private funding that's going to be made available primarily for the EV market. So EV vehicle manufacturing, EV battery manufacturing, and then the whole charging infrastructure. And so Janet's going to talk about that at Magnet's new facility here. But there is a marvelous ecosystem here in Cleveland. I just happen to sit on boards of both Magnet, which is a manufacturing consultancy, and Jumpstart that helps companies get started here in Cleveland. It is a great ecosystem, and now that Promise Partners is having this forum, I mean, it's a wonderful opportunity for people to get into business, and I just want to speak on how I winded up looking at certain acquisitions. And so you don't necessarily need, if you're trying to acquire your first business or maybe an add-on acquisition, you don't necessarily need 50% equity or 100% equity, like was said earlier. Banks, senior lenders will do a deal night and day for 20% equity. So if you're looking for $1 million transaction, that's $200,000. If it's $10 million, obviously do the math there. But if you bring in the SBA, you can tear that equity down. Obviously, your leverage goes up, but you're looking at possibly 10%. And so you have an LBO on a smaller basis, and most people can afford to do that. But the one thing I did want to mention also is you can't, well, at least I don't suggest just raising enough equity just to do the deal. Because when problems happen, and I can guarantee you 100% that you will run into a problem, you need the wherewithal, the financial wherewithal to withstand that problem. Neither that is additional senior financing, that's additional equity that you're going to raise outside of your organization or within your own pocket to weather those kind of seasonal types of events. And it could be a lot of different things that might happen. But the educational infrastructure here in Cleveland is one of the country's best. And the things I look at when I'm trying to do an acquisition is how can I optimize the operations? I call it more operational optimization. How can I, leverage other people's money, OPM? And how can I control the enterprise and really impact those organizations? And with institutions like CASE, bringing brain power to help me figure out those elements, it's incredible. And, for an example, I just recently passed on a deal, small acquisition I was looking at, something I can easily acquire, but I couldn't really quickly come up with the individuals that I needed to replace the management team that was exiting. And how frustrating was that, looking at a several million-dollar enterprise valuation, very strong historical cash flows, and a valuation, quite frankly, that was very, very reasonable for me to look at, and how I can put a team in there and really optimize valuation or the operations to really improve valuations, but I wound up passing on that transaction. So there is certainly an infrastructure here in Cleveland. Promise Partners, I really didn't know about some of the opportunities to work with Promise Partners and individuals that may come out of CASE. But for entrepreneurs, it is a wonderful business community.
Thanks. All right, Scott, let's talk a little bit more about this then. I mean, some things that Promise does, well, it's about playing bigger. We've already talked a bit about that. It's about paying it forward, and that seems to be a characteristic of the folks that are engaged here, wanting to do something bigger. There's no secret sauce, really. We'll tell anyone that wants to know what the organization does. I want you to spend a little bit of time speaking about what we call our right-hand person program, both because I think it appeals to people that are maybe looking to, prove their worth and find out if buying a company is really, it might be in their DNA, but let's just have a little test. And for people that are looking to transition out of business ownership, it's an interesting way of passing on the business potentially to someone that they know is going to be a good operator. Just maybe say a bit about that.
Yeah, just I want to talk about that for sure. And I love what's emerged in the panel here. So yesterday I was in Chicago at a ETA event put on by partnership with Chicago Booth and Kellogg, and there were 700 people in the room. And most of the people were flying in from other places. And so I came away really excited because we've been doing ETA here in Cleveland as a result of Pat and Richard for 30 years, but like Clevelanders do, we haven't been bragging about it. We haven't been shouting about it. And when we were doing the little purpose exercise at the beginning, Matt Previtz was in my group, and he made the comment that Cleveland is the biggest small town in America. And so I'm thinking, here we are in the middle of this ecosystem that this is the first time that we've ever publicly had an event talking about Promise Partners. And the ETA opportunity is growing really fast. There were some statistics shared at that event that the investment in ETA-like investments is growing at 30% compounded annual growth. And there's big players coming in. So when I got started, there wasn't as many big money partners like a Riverside available to partner with, but today a lot of the venture capital firms have ETA funds. They have their traditional venture capital funds. A lot of the PE firms are doing dedicated investments around individuals and single companies. There's like 4 or 5 different models that are emerging. There's tons of capital, tons of experience. And we have a very mature ecosystem. We just haven't been talking about it. And I'm just thinking, just preparing for this event, I reached out to a few people. I reached out to Scott Shane, and I got to know Marling. I reached out to Michael Goldberg, and I got to know Charu. I reached out to Brandon Kornuk, and I got to know Larry. And right here, if I knew Larry 6 months ago, somebody in Promise Partners would be running the company that he was going to buy. And I'm going to introduce Charo to somebody that's in this room to potentially help with her fintech company. And so I think the fact that Cleveland's the biggest small town in America is a huge advantage, because we can connect up this ecosystem really fast. And this idea of right-hand person, so people that are interested in entrepreneurship through acquisition, sometimes they have big company experience. Maybe they worked at a bank, or like me, I worked in a large commercial construction company, and I had a calling to small business, but I wasn't 100% sure. And so oftentimes we will suggest and encourage somebody in the Promise Partners group to go find a small company that you can effectively be an apprentice in there. And it's really an interesting opportunity to sort of try before you buy. Like, are you really cut out for that environment? Because it is dramatically different. And as a result of jumping in, and maybe if you're working for one of Larry's companies or for one of our companies, and then you're successful, you like it, then you can go to a Riverside and say, hey, I want to go buy a $20 million company. I've been running a $5, $10, $15 million company. I created a bunch of value. You're way more backable, if you will. And so the right-hand person has become a specific move or strategy that a lot of people who come to Promise Partners, and we have a very well-designed, purposeful mentoring program. People get into small cohorts with mentors, and they peer coach each other and get ongoing support. That's a common suggestion or opportunity that people pursue, and so it's been a helpful feature for a long time.
Yeah, we don't bet 1,000, do we? I mean, but it's always interesting. People really find if this is really for them, and the companies get to find good operators. Malin, what was your story around financing? You didn't go the PE route, or you don't really?
No, so a lot of interesting deal structures and a lot of bootstrapping. I came from more of the startup side of the world, and then went from startups and used the cash flow from the startups to start getting into acquisitions. That was kind of my journey. So a little bit of both sides. So yeah, a lot of bootstrap.
I know that convener only has 2 jobs, start on time and finish on time, and I've completely forgotten what time I'm supposed to be finishing. So where's all right, and so I'm going to take some questions from, if any of you got some questions down there, I mean, we'll come around with microphones down there. Cheryl and Cheryl, maybe just talk a little bit more about the characteristics of backable CEOs. What do you got? What do you look for in when you're thinking about, what's in the background of a backable CEO for you?
I think culture fit, and because in a startup, most people are wearing multiple hats, and there's no onboarding training in an early stage startup. There's not a lot of processes in place. So when someone comes on board, you're basically here, like how a penguin teaches its children to swim, just put it in the cold Antarctic waters and you figure it out, right? So it's kind of like that, and it's very different. And I had the reverse experience, so I'll just draw on that. So when my first company was acquired by a very large company, we went from a 40-person company to a 90,000-person company. And whatever happened to me, the reverse will happen to the person that comes back into the little company, and it's not fun. And it's also, the other part of it is the ownership piece, the corporate ladder, all of that is very difficult in a startup environment. That's where the culture is. You're doing it because you're really passionate about making that idea successful, investing in the team that's been there before, and really taking over very much like a family member, and being able to understand where they are, take the time to understand why took the risk that they did, why are they involved. And everything's within hand's reach, but being very deliberate about understanding the team as much as the opportunity will be very important. Because I think, Cheryl, you said something like private equity is known for coming in and gutting the company, bringing in its own people. That's kind of the fear factor. When a new CEO comes on board, the first thing the team is thinking is, that's it, I'm going to look for other opportunities. And you can generate a new leader. Now all the other cooks have left, and you're not going to be able to put that menu out, right? So it's really important that there's transparency, and there's also that value transfer. This team has been here before, has been through the trenches, and there has to be some mutual respect that's built in. So there's quite a bit of planning that needs to be involved in order to make that, culture fit. And so when I was brought on board with my company's acquisition, there was actually a 35-slide presentation on how culture eats strategy for breakfast, or something like that. Well, it ate it for lunch, dinner, breakfast, and everything, and I had to run away from there. So I think that's something that it's very, we have to be just cognizant of it to get ahead of it.
That is a very, very terrific set of words of wisdom, and I'm going to go from a little bit of a technical perspective, and I think you'll find the things I'm going to cite from Riverside's CEO hiring scorecard echo many of the things that you just shared. These are just a couple excerpts. The laundry list of traits and characteristics is quite long. It's almost hard to believe one person has all of them. But I will say, as we bring in new CEOs, we also understand one person is not perfect. We are looking to understand the qualities and characteristics they have, and where there are gaps, there's always going to be gaps. Can we help fill them by a board member or a surrounding operating partner team or a collaborator to help address and balance the leadership team? But I'll just read through some examples of our traits we're looking for. One is relentless growth focus. Track record of growth. These are the kind of things that early on in your career, for those who are in the aspiring camp, look at anything you're working on, and can you, over the course of a year or look back, document growth that you have influenced or effected or made happen. I think being in a right-hand man or woman role, which Scott Lowry mentioned a moment ago, is a great way to develop a growth track record. Digitally savvy. This is just in every business, whether you're a manufacturing business or a software or healthcare technology tool, understanding how customer behavior is impacted in the digital sales world and social media world is quite important. Process and operationally oriented. This is probably one of the going from small company to big company characteristics, but we find even small businesses that want to excel, that want to be little leaders, need leadership who can take something that happens a few times and, you look at what drives success. Oh, this random walk occurred and we generated this great sale. Well, how can you turn that into a process and repeat it and think about process orientation that helps make your employees solve problems and be more effective with their time to make the big things happen? And then the last one is leads from the front, but this gets to the relationship building. It's really building great relationships. When something important is happening, being there, being present. We have portfolio companies, for example, in one state that are making an add-on acquisition in another state. The day before, the month before, there has to be a careful orchestration of what is going to happen so that everybody feels valued and welcomed into this new organization and doesn't leave. You can't be working remotely and sending emails that day. You've got to be out front and be the kind of person that will do that.
Thanks, Cheryl.
I do have one more question for Larry and Scott. Search funds. I know, Larry, you self-funded your search for your first acquisition. Scott, yours was more of a funded search. Apart from running out of money, Larry, can you talk a little bit about the benefits, or the pros and cons of your approach, and then maybe you could as well, Scott?
Sure. One of the primary benefits is I'm 100% owner of all of my businesses. I have 100% equity. I make what I call as COO. So I have control and impact. So that's the C. O is the operational optimization that I kind of mentioned earlier. And then the other O is really leverage or other people's money. I can do that. But the real reason why I do that type of purpose is really value appreciation. So if I'm buying a company, and let's say the EBITDA is $1 million, and that initial acquisition valuation is 4 times EBITDA, that's a $4 million acquisition play, right? Through optimization of the operations, having a great team, a great leadership team that gets it, that has the grit and determination, and works with me through metrics, which I monitor metrics every week. So I don't have a long review mirror. Every week we look at metrics, and they're very key critical aspects of running the business, everything that I need to understand my organization. I can optimize the business, and hopefully through that optimization, I'm going to improve EBITDA or cash flow or enterprise value in such a way that I'm going to move from that $1 million cash flow to $3 million. And then at the same valuation, I've now taken a $4 million purchase price, and I can sell that business for 12, 16, and that's what I do. Yeah.
Yeah, Scott, your experience.
Yeah, I mean, I love the way the conversation is playing out, because I remember when I first got involved with Promise Partners, there were 7 or 8 people that had gone from employee to owner. And the first thing I did is I just went and I met with all of them, and I asked them, well, how did you go from employee to owner, and how did you do it, and how did you do it? And all the stories were different. And I think that's one of the really valuable things about this big choice that Kevin talked about. There's no right or wrong. It's just whatever speaks to you. And Larry, there's a lot of great benefits for the approach that Larry took. And for me, I took a more of a sponsored approach. So I mentioned there are 4 or 5 distinct models in the marketplace. We're not going to get into that today. There's going to be some opportunities to access more content after the session today. My motto was to find one partner who had a lot of experience in acquisitions, so that I could buy a bigger company than I could buy by myself. Larry mentioned the SBA route. You can buy a nice company with a very small amount of money all by yourself using the SBA. I wanted to buy a little bit of a bigger company, but most importantly, I wanted to have somebody who had actually bought a company before, because that's a point in time. I had pretty solid operating experience. I could point to growing a team, leading a team, being good at operations, things like that. I'd never bought a business before, so how do you value it? How do you find it? How do you finance it? How do you and the things that my partner shared with me through the process were absolutely invaluable. I had an MBA and I thought it was a spreadsheet game, and my partner said it's all about the relationship with the seller. You gotta understand the seller. What are their motivations? What are their goals? Build that relationship. And if I didn't get that advice, we never would have been successful with our first acquisition, because the process died 3 times because of different reasons. And because I was focused on that relationship early in the process, we were able to recover and ultimately get that done. So for me, it's about that the capital is super helpful, but the mentorship, the advisory before, during, and after the process, I've avoided so many mistakes because of the support of my original partner, and now today multiple partners. and I've recovered from the mistakes I made anyway way faster because of that network of support. So I've found that over time, I don't own all the pie like Larry does. I own a slice of the pie, but with partners, that pie gets bigger pretty fast, I've found. And so that's worked out great in terms of taking the sponsored approach that I chose to take.
Yeah, very cool. I've got a few minutes. Any burning questions from anyone in the audience? I mean, let's get Lauren running around. Mr. Kesson.
Is this working? It is. All right, good morning. Excellent job, first of all, by everyone on the panel. Thank you. I'd love for you to talk a little bit to the business owners in the room. How does ETA help an existing business owner grow their business, scale their business, work through a challenge, enter a new market, deal with talent disparities that are out in the market today? I'd love to hear the panel's perspective on that.
Yeah, I'll just address that really quick. I mean, Larry mentioned his recent story. He could have grown his portfolio even more if he had a right-hand person involved in the business. And so for me, one of the ideas early on was, my partner's Kevin. So you guys got to know Kevin a little bit. So he partnered with a guy named John. He did an ETA journey. Then Kevin and I partnered. We did an ETA journey. And then one of our insights early on was, how do we go from doing this once a generation to more frequently? And so we started to consciously attract people who are aspiring to own businesses to work with us in our companies. And we made the commitment that first and foremost, we're going to help you achieve your dream. So your dream of business ownership is our dream. And in the meantime, we're going to work on these companies together. And so that has led to multiple spin-up, companies that we've spun out, multiple companies that we've acquired. I was able to replace myself in our first acquisition so that I could free my time up to do more acquisitions, because we brought an entrepreneurial-minded leader in. And you talk about Cheryl's profile. I mean, when we consciously seek to work with people who have a burning desire to own a business, they tend to be super resilient, highly creative, have an ownership mentality, great problem solvers. I mean, that's a wonderful profile for somebody to be on your team to help you grow your business. So it's been wonderful, and our commitment is always, your dream's our dream. We've ended up partnering with 8 or 9 people that have become business owners as partners, and we've had 2 or 3x that number of people that went on and did something else, either their own business or something else, who created massive value while they were with us and have done amazing things, and we're just as proud of that. And so
I took Steve's question the other way, Scott. I think it's more so like when we're talking about your stuff, or when we're talking about Sean's stuff, or any of the examples we do in class, the seller of the business could probably get more dough selling to a strategic, for instance, or selling to a play. And it's interesting that somehow they come around to this ETA way of thinking. Was that more the spirit of your questions, Steve, or both?
Yeah, I'll hit that super quick, and then I'll pass it off, so that I got the memo at the beginning of the.
Got it.
Yeah, thank you. When we're out talking to companies and sellers about buying their company, our first screen is, does the legacy matter? Do they care what happens to the business over time? And if they do, it's a great opportunity. And some people are just done. They're out. They're looking for the highest price, and that's okay. But that's not for us. If our mantra is, your legacy is our legacy, and so when we find sellers who really care what the future of the business looks like, and unlike a fund, when we're doing it, we don't have a fund, so we don't have a time frame. We have very patient capital, and so we can sit down with sellers and say, a lot of founder-led companies, they have a lot of family in the business, and we can paint a picture of the next 10, 15, 20 years of what that business is going to look like. And a lot of people are really interested in that, so we tend to, this sort of entrepreneurship through acquisition oftentimes has a longer time frame. And again, there's lots of different models. I love Cheryl's model. I love Larry's model. It just depends on what you're shooting for.
Yeah. I think testament to that is the number of owners that stay engaged in some way, sort of operationally or financially. Anyone else want to take this, Malin? You or Sharon?
Yeah, I was just going to touch on, as an existing business owner, looking at other acquisitions was how I was interpreting the question. And, looking at other adjacent markets or either talent or can you take your product into a nearby market? That was definitely a driver for a couple of acquisitions we did, where there was something that put the two together and it was worth more than the sum of the parts. And if you can find those opportunities, I do think it's a great way to expand into an existing business. Could you build it? Sure, but there's a lot more risk and timeline in building that out versus just acquiring somebody in a new space in order to expand in that direction. The danger, of course, is the Italian restaurant sushi challenge, where if it's too many different businesses going on in one, you really got to watch out for that. And maybe you're acquiring a business, folding one part of it in and spinning out another. So it can definitely be part of the journey, though. And sorry if I went too fast on the Italian restaurant sushi.
I don't think I teach that, but I mean, maybe
I've had too many brands in the same at the same time. So yeah, it's learned that lesson many times, unfortunately.
Got it. Very good. Any other questions? I think we've got time for one more. If there's something, yes, sir. We might not get the mic to you. I'm sorry.
I'll try and be loud enough so we can hear. So as you acquire additional businesses and you're looking to optimize, do you usually centralize your macro control, your back office process? Thank you. Or are you looking to keep those autonomous as independent entities? So I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
I'll throw out one quick version. We tried centralizing for ours in different SaaS companies, different models, different portfolios. We tried centralizing development. We centralized a lot of go-to-market strategy for these different products and didn't like it at all. So again, I'm sure it works for some people, but for us, we thought splitting it up, making them more autonomous, and getting. I think we centralized because we didn't have enough leadership on the team. So speaking of the right-hand man type of opportunities there, I do think that's if there was more leadership, we would have gone diverse earlier. When we made that change, it was a significant improvement. That was our experience.
I've taken the strategy of everything is separate. So Handling Composites, for an example, has a completely separate management team. Lufco Worthington has a completely separate management team. The only kind of cross overlay is really me. And unfortunately, we just lost our maintenance person. So maintenance, finance would be an overlay. But the operations itself, the businesses, they're separate entities, separate customers, employees, separate facilities. Everything is separate. And from a financial control standpoint, it's easier for me to really manage that.
Quick read on that. So the Riverside company has about 90 portfolio companies where we're the majority share stakeholder. Every single one of those is a separate business. It's an individual C Corp or otherwise individually organized. Now, when a platform company makes add-on acquisitions, we're very careful to not add on companies that don't belong together operationally to begin with. So we owned a chocolate chip cookie company once, and we just didn't buy ice cream companies or other types of snack food. We ended up, that business was just made sense to grow organically under one brand and one operation. But when we make add-on acquisitions of similar, say, field service, office plumbing, or field safety inspection, we are going to integrate those companies. We want them under the same accounting system. We want, we want the right resources scaled throughout the business so that there isn't duplication and inefficiency.
I'll just say just real quickly on that. For Lufco, we've done a number of bolt-ons, and each one of those bolt-ons, very similar strategy. Same strategy, essentially. Primarily for us is, I'll go back to the optimization as well, is we've done a pretty good job eliminating duplicative expenses like leases, utilities, phone, all the normal costs, even administrative costs, all those kind of duplicative expenses. And so that's really fell straight down to our bottom line.
Can I throw a follow-on on there? I'm interested in how you're dealing with the loss of a key person like your maintenance staff. Did you try to approach and recover and offer a better salary? What did you do to respond?
That is really, in my opinion, the gorilla in the room. Just there's two jobs for every one employee. Unemployment right now is 3.5%. Actually, this goes into one of the questions I have for Jen. Yellen here in a few minutes. But it's really challenging to keep and then also motivate employees today. We are spending an incredible amount of our energy in terms of employee acquisition. It used to not necessarily be a corporate focus. It was always very important for us, obviously, but now it is a corporate focus. It is a strategic imperative for us to focus on employee acquisition. So losing anyone from a manufacturing standpoint to senior leadership to a maintenance position, it hurts. We certainly do things like we talk, we do exit interviews, we try to find out, okay, what happened. But a lot of times it's because of COVID, there's a kind of refocus. It's a different paradigm that we're dealing with. Gen X's or Gen X's, they're more video responsive. Their approach to business is a little different. And so we're trying to orient ourselves to try to figure out how do we keep, maintain, and attract this type of talent. Whereas our older employees, we typically don't necessarily have that much of a problem. They're coming to work every day, they're working, they're grinding, The efficiency, the productivity is there. Our challenge is just like a lot of other manufacturing companies throughout the country is, again, how do you motivate, how do you improve operations, you keep your revenue per FTE or revenue per employee the same, if not try to grow that trend and all those different metrics. But it is a challenge. It is here to stay. So those companies that don't get it right, that don't employ technology and video within their processes or training diagrams or whatever, they're going to lose out at the end of the day. I can guarantee you that. And you just have to be creative. You have to be aggressive and attack this like a strategic imperative like what we are. So.
I'll just say one last thing. There's an incredible book that just came out recently called Humanocracy. So if anybody's wrestling with, how do you engage and really connect with people in business these days, there's some amazing statistics, research, and it seems to be the way of the future in terms of interacting with the workforce that we're presented with these days.
Thanks, Scott. It's appropriate that I think we finished with Larry bringing up a gorilla. The gorilla was the in-class nickname of Professor Richard Osborne. It was one of his tricks to be effective in class was to give everyone a nickname. What was your nickname?
Big Daddy.
Okay.
We were pregnant with my first son at the time.
Okay. Mine is still the Saint, for obvious reasons, And all right, you're Larry's, yes, of course.
Mine was Big L.
Big L.
Big L.
Right. Again, I've got that. Cheryl, what were we?
Oh, sorry.
Well, mine was driver. It had to do with being able to play golf more that summer that I started in the MBA program and being very happy that I was having good drives at the time.
Well, look, thanks everyone. Marlon, thank you. Charu, thank you. Cheryl, thank you. Larry, thank you. Scott, thank you. And I'm going to hand it back to Todd.
All right, thank you, Simon. Thank you, everybody on the panel. I'm just going to ask if you could stay up there for a few minutes. And I'd love to give everyone an opportunity to reflect on some of the insights, some of the learnings, some of the new things that emerge for you from this panel, right? And so if you open up your workbooks, I think it's on page 7, there's a spot to jot down some notes as it relates to what you heard from each of these panel members. And as I was listening at the back of the room, a couple things emerged for me, and I'll encourage you to think about these too. One is just think about the opportunities, right? Char was saying it beautifully well. 2 weeks ago, you didn't know a lot about ETA and what was available. What was emerging for you as you took the insights, the lessons, the stories from each of these panel members? What are the opportunities that you're now seeing? So what are some new ideas that emerged for you? They could be ideas you heard directly, or it could be something that's emerging, something that's building up based on the ideas of what you heard combined from all 5 of these panel members. I'm going to give you about 60 seconds right now. And just to encourage you to write down any of those key insights or any actions you're feeling compelled to take beside each of the panel members there. And then we're going to open it up for some conversation about those. So Mark, if you can keep just a little bit of journaling music, 60 seconds or so, jot down the biggest insights, the biggest ideas, the things that are emerging for you from the panel itself. All right, everybody, we're going to get started again. If I could have the panel members come back and join me up at the front, that would be wonderful. Cheryl, Marling, Charu, we've got Scott up here. Did Larry have to leave? He did. Okay. And Lauren, if we got a couple mic runners, that would be awesome. What I'd love to do, at this point is I want to get a few of you to share, right? And I want to have maybe 1, 2 folks for each panel member, just to acknowledge something you took from what they shared with all of us, right? And we're just going to go down the line here. Maybe we'll start with Marling. I'd love to hear from 1, 2, maybe 3 people. What's a new insight, an emerging idea that you got from what Marling shared with us? Just take a moment to acknowledge or appreciate that. Right here, Lauren, up at the front.
Dropping the sushi from my Italian restaurant.
The sushi from the Italian restaurant, I love it. How about another share? Something you got from Marling, something you want to acknowledge or appreciate?
I have one.
All right, we'll go here and then back there.
So I think you have a secret author within you, like Dietrich Potter. But my favorite takeaway was when you played off.
My favorite thing was the thing you played off Kevin Shaw about the road less traveled. So it has a lot of puddles. Don't wear fine leather shoes. That was brilliant.
Awesome. Thank you. I think there was one in the back here as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I just appreciated the comment that the first acquisition's at the end of the journey. It's easy to get sometimes caught up in such a big moment and decision in that way, and just that reminder that life is always a journey in all aspects, but this is no different in that way, so appreciated that.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's move down along the line now to Chara. Who has something they want to acknowledge or appreciate they took from Chara? Right up here at the front.
Hi, Charu. I really loved when you said that culture eats strategy for breakfast. I've seen that over and over. I am young, they tell me. I'm only 32, but I've seen it many times. And I never really thought about it that way. And that we really maybe need to respect culture a little bit more and understand what it wants before it gobbles all of that up. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. How about 1 or 2 more? Something you want to acknowledge or appreciate right here?
I thought the part about relationships was very profound. I'm a good relationship person, but I didn't realize that was really the, I guess, the secret sauce. I usually come in the back end when the LOI is signed, so I'm going through the process versus understanding, on the front end, how do we even get to that potential target accepting the LOI.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. Yeah, the one thing I wrote down on that concept was, and this is coming from a recovering CPA, if you remember, relationships beat spreadsheets. Relationships beat spreadsheets. That's a tongue twister. All right, let's keep going down. Cheryl, who wants to acknowledge or appreciate something you took from Cheryl?
First of all, thank you all for your time. Very appreciated. Great insight. And a couple things that I took away was the CEO scorecard. I thought that was really cool. And none of it talked about relative experience within the industry they're looking to join, which I think is a big fear obstacle for a lot of people aspiring to get into business. Get familiar with or don't have the technical expertise. The other thing is the story that you told about finding the entrepreneur and then replacing that individual as a leader within the organization on an acquisition that you were making, finding an entrepreneur founder that was humble enough to step out of the way and find somebody that would care for the business, grow for the business, and the associates in the market. So great takeaways for me.
Awesome, thank you. How about 1 or 2 more for Cheryl?
The success rate on your portfolio, 4,000 down to 68, so that's a 2% success rate right here. I'm not sure everybody sees that, but that's a big number, or that's a small number for success. Sir.
Awesome, thank you. And right up here.
Yeah, well, thank you all for your time, first of all. But I thought, the big thing that hit me was your point about, do CEOs have a relentless growth mindset? And I think that that's something that we maybe don't keep in the back of our mind enough. Is that something that we've got at the top of mind, throughout the whole year, not just day in and day out, but at all times. So thank you.
Awesome, love it. All right, let's move along. And Larry's not here. He had to duck out. But I'd love to hear from 1, 2, maybe 3 folks. Something you took, an insight that you got from Larry, or an idea that was emerging for you from what he talked about. Right up here.
Well, I think that's something he brought up that I found really important. I'm not a business owner, not looking to acquire, just here to learn. But the piece that he brought up that he didn't go in on the deal because he didn't have the right people in place. I think that that's how some folks that are adjacent to everything that's going on in this room today can be really valuable partners. So we may not have the business acumen to tell you if it's a good deal or not, or if this is a great strategy or not, but what we can is offer networking, offer those transformational relationships to be a value add. So that's what I'm taking away from what Larry was talking about, seeing his situation as an opportunity for myself, but also for others to lean in with other things outside of maybe business acumen. But if you know people, you know the right people to put in place or the right relationships to leverage to help support folks that are trying to achieve their dreams.
Awesome, love it. All right, and let's go to Scott. Something you took from what Scott shared with us, something you want to acknowledge or appreciate, insight, new idea, something that was emerging for you from what Scott Lowry shared. 1, 2, 3 folks. Oh, right up front, sorry.
Hey, Scott, this is actually something you said to me in a call that we had, but making sure you manage the relationship with the seller throughout the whole process, because there's a million things that can tank a deal and a lot of things that can make them walk away from the table. And it's very important to keep them there.
Beautiful, thank you. How about 1 or 2 more? Something you took, yep, right up here. We're keeping you hopping, Lord.
That having a partner wasn't just about, I mean, it was about being able to make a larger acquisition, but even more importantly was all the insights that could be learned from that experience that partner brought.
Beautiful, awesome, thank you. Here's one thing, I'll just kind of wrap this up and bring it together for me, what emerged. And it goes back to what I said right before this is opportunity, right? That was the word that kept popping into my head. As each person shared and talked about some of their stories, is when we think about this ecosystem, I just think about opportunity, right? Someone, I think it was Steve at the back, asked a question around, what might a business owner be thinking about this? And I couldn't, help but think of all the different opportunities that might be available to a current business owner. Growth, scaling your current company, bringing someone in to be that right-hand person to fill in a talent gap that you have, someone that is looking to go their own journey and maybe willing to attach themselves to a mission and do some things that they wouldn't otherwise for that level of compensation. Someone who's looking to come in and potentially acquire a company, maybe that's your company, right? So a business owner that's looking to exit, or a lot of the work that I do kind of as a side, a passion project is with fathers. And a lot of those business owners are looking, how do I work less so I can be more present with my family? Lots of different opportunities. The biggest thing is, how do we make a bigger impact together for the community and for the world? How do we solve some of those big problems? Just lots of opportunity based on your experiences. So I want to thank each of the panel members and ask you to join me, but I also want to thank Simon for a beautiful job in moderating that discussion. It felt like we were sitting in someone's living room watching a conversation versus a panel. So thank you, Simon. Thank you, panel members. Let's give them a round of applause.